Hey guys, today I wanted to make a video covering the red-purple control mirror matchup. Red-purple is by far the most popular deck in the metagame, and near the top ladder of Pixelborn, it accounts for over 20% of the field. That means if you're going to play this deck, you're definitely going to have to learn the mirror match, and from my experience, it's by far the most complicated matchup I've played in Lorcana. I don't think any other matchup comes even close to the horror that is red-purple control mirror. Either that or I'm just not very good at the game. The deck list we're going to use today is a 67 card deck. It runs 67 cards to fight against the mirror match and to also have enough room to fit the Mickey Broom package, which I'll get to later. In the mirror match, if both players are playing correctly, it should be a very passive game that sets up for a late game where both players have almost no cards left in their decks. And that's when the late game combo engines come out. Most of it revolves around Broom recursion. I'm by no means an expert in this matchup, or even this deck, but the more I played purple-red control, the more confused I got, and when I tried to look for some guides on how to play, I couldn't really find much information on it, so I decided I'd give this video a shot. Because these games play very passively, most games will take at least 40 minutes and can go as long as an hour and a half. So I would not recommend playing this deck if you're impatient, in a rush to be somewhere, or wanting a simple deck to play. Red-purple is probably the most complicated deck in Lorcana at the moment, but it's really fun, and playing it correctly can feel really rewarding. So I queue up for ladder, and we're playing second, and we have a not so great hand, and of course we don't really know what we're going to be up against. Here I think keeping a Sergeant Tibbs is a absolute mandatory to try and ward off some early game aggression. The rest of my cards are too expensive, so I want to dump them all, but I end up keeping a Maui too, just because he can be inked early on against control, and he comes in pretty clutch on turn 5 against aggro. We're mostly hoping to draw a Gaston for a 2-drop and a card draw mechanic like Maleficent, Cauldron, or Friends on the other side. Magic Mirror is okay, but it's a bit slow, and we don't want that in our starting hand if we're against an aggro deck. So we mulligan pretty poorly, and this hand should typically auto-lose against a turn 1 Lilo, turn 2 Simba type deck. That's just sort of the nature of Lorcana when facing aggro decks who play first. Now the first thing we want to do is look at our opponent's first ink card. He inks a Pocketwatch, so that signals to us that he's almost definitely playing purple-red control. Pocketwatch is actually an extremely important card in the mirror match, and I think going second in a mirror match is actually advantageous. Our plan, now that we know we're against another control deck, is to try to ink to 20 to 26 ink for the late game. The cards we want to ink are going to be all our 1-drops, Mauis, Gastons, as much of our small Maleficent and Friends on the other side as we can afford, as well as a few random straggler cards like Jafar, small Aladdins. Even the Queen is not particularly great in the matchup. This should bring us to about 20 ink or more. Everything else I did not mention is pretty critical in the matchup, so you have to ink very carefully since you're going to run through your entire deck trying to hit 20 or more ink. I ink a Tibbs, which is fine, but I should have probably started with inking a Maui since I have 2, just on the off chance that he's not playing control. But when I saw the Pocketwatch, I was just 90% sure he was. My opponent inks a Gaston and plays Magic Mirror, so now we're sure we're up against purple-red control. Here I hovered over his deck count and noticed he's got 62 cards left, so he started with about a 68 card deck, and we could have just checked that right off the bat to know he's playing control, but I just forgot to this game. The rest of the early game is going to be extremely boring since I think my opponent seems to know this matchup reasonably well, and he just inks and draws cards with Mirror, and I do the same. So I'll sort of just fast forward through the early game and talk about why that's happening. So red-purple plays around 10 to 14 big lore threats, and also plays about the same amount of removal. Dragon Maleficent counts as both categories. What ends up happening in the match is that both decks will just neutralize each other's big threats with their removal cards, and it grinds out to the end game where the brooms start cycling back the threats as well as threat removal. If both players know this, then they'll just play super passively and try to build up for the end game. The reason you don't try to go super aggro with cards like Archimedes or Small Aladdins is because then you just give your opponent value with Rafiki or Pocketwatch rushed Aladdins, and if you really overextend, you give them value with Be Prepared. Also, by playing these cards, you're not building towards your 20 plus ink base for a late game, and you're really not going to be able to win off questing early to mid game, so you're just setting yourself up to lose in the late game. Of course, the exception is if your opponent can't ever find a mirror and you have one active, in which case you should just try and finish them off early with your massive card advantage. The mid game is similar to early game. Both players are just inking and drawing cards with mirror. Once you have an active mirror, I think you should definitely start inking your small Maleficents and friends on the other side. If you have a Shield of Virtue in play, you can actually start applying one lore pressure by questing and readying the character afterwards. I played my first Broom and shuffled back in a Maleficent, which I plan to ink later. Unfortunately, I never got a shield so that I could safely quest with my Broom. My opponent used an Aladdin on my Broom, but since it's super early game, I don't think it really mattered that much. But since I sort of provoked him in the game by questing with a Broom, he removed it with an Aladdin, and then I had to remove Aladdin with a Dragonfire. But you can see already why it's important to have a Pocket Watch and Shield and how they're crucial in this matchup. I also really like running a couple Goofies, since those cards are threats that need to be dealt with, as they don't really need a shield to quest since they're evasive characters. They're also nice to have against evasive creature decks. My opponent deals with my Goofy immediately, so you can see how trying to be aggressive in this matchup early or middle isn't too important, as all the threats will be removed right away. A bit later on into the mid game, I decide to play the Queen. I think I could have inked her, as she's not even that big of a threat. Since you need to keep using shield and 3 ink to ready her, she's basically another magic mirror. I mostly played her because I wanted to bait out another removal card from my opponent's hand, which he did end up using a Dragonfire to get rid of her. I finally get a shield, and my opponent hasn't been really utilizing his shield for the one lore point pokes, but when I have a shield around this time of the game, I like to throw a few cheap characters like Brooms or Aladdin and start questing with them while readying them with the shield. So my opponent will have to usually deal with this. He plays an Ursula, which I have to deal with, and I use Dragon Maleficent on it. And then he gets rid of the board, seeing that he could get a 2-for-1 trade with his Be Prepared. I go ahead and I play another small Aladdin to start questing with the shield. And he plays a Mickey and Elsa, and Mickey is a must remove threat, so I go ahead and use my own Be Prepared after questing. We exchange a few more threats for removal, and somehow he actually lets me get a swing in with Ursula for 3 lore, which should probably never happen. But we're both at extremely low lore, so he probably felt super safe. Both of us are approaching the endgame as we're both hitting close to 20 ink, and then I realized why he allowed my Ursula to stay on the board. I probably should have gotten rid of his small Elsa, but I stopped running that card in my deck, and I forgot it could combo with Mickey Broom. So here he exerts my Ursula with his Elsa, and starts smashing his brooms into her after playing Mickey. Each broom he crashes into Ursula will get him another card out of his banish pile back into his deck, so I definitely should not have allowed this to happen, as he crashed 2 brooms into her and gets rid of my Ursula with his Rush Mickey double attack using Shield of Valor. He returns an evasive Mickey back into his deck, which I think is fine, since it's a pretty high threat card. On my turn, I go ahead and rush an Aladdin into a small Elsa, since he wasn't able to shield her, so I could extend my lore lead. He Dragon Maleficents my Aladdin, and then I Dragon Maleficent his dragon back. When someone plays a high threat card, the players usually end up trading a bunch of Dragon Maleficents back and forth. He decides to get rid of my dragon with an Elsa Aladdin Pocketwatch combo, which costs 16 ink, and kind of goes to show you why you need to build up a large ink well for the late game. I Dragon Maleficent his Elsa again, and then he plays 4 Rafikis on his turn, trying to get rid of my Be Prepared and asking me if I want to race his 4 lore versus my 2 on my dragon. I take this opportunity to unleash the Elsa Mickey Broom combo, where I crash 3 brooms into 2 of his Rafikis to get some value back from my banish pile. I end up returning a broom, an evasive Mickey, and a heroic Aladdin. Your main targets for this combo with your brooms is gonna be Elsa and Broom Mickey, but since I didn't have them in my banish pile, I ended up going with those other cards. Now it's my opponent's turn to start his Elsa Mickey Broom combo. He ends up playing 3 brooms and grabbing an Aladdin, Dragon Maleficent, and an Elsa into his deck. He ends up playing 1 more broom to grab another Aladdin, though I think holding on to that last broom is probably a fine play as well. On my turn, I'm very happy he allowed me to get 3 more lore with my Elsa, and then I clear the board with Be Prepared and drop a Goofy, which again is a must deal with threat. This will force a direct removal card. He dragons my Goofy, I dragon his dragon, and now we're at the final stages of the game where I'm down to 3 cards left in my deck, but this is not a big concern since I can keep brooming back brooms. By keeping your deck count at 1 or 2, you can use Cauldron and Magic Mirrors to draw exactly the card you need from your deck. He dragons my dragon as well, and then plays a Broom. On my turn, I feel like there's good value again with the Elsa Mickey Broom engine, so I go for it, grabbing back the Mickey and Elsa components of my combo. I messed up here though because I played Rafiki and I got rid of his dragon, even though I had another Pocketwatch and enough ink to crash one more Broom for one more card, which I should have done. You can crash as many Brooms as you have Pocketwatches. If your deck is running 2 Pocketwatches, you're going to break even on the Elsa Mickey Broom combo, and if you have 3 Pocketwatches, you start profiting 1 card if you can find enough targets to crash into your Broom. That's why it's important that you don't ink your Pocketwatches in this matchup, as they'll generate card advantage over the long term in the endgame. My deck only runs 3 copies, but my opponent's deck runs 4. But luckily for us, he inked his first Pocketwatch at the start of the game, so we are fairly matched with Broom Recursion. Otherwise, I think he would have had a very big advantage in this mirror late game. So yeah, this is basically what the mirror comes down to. My opponent does the Mickey Elsa Broom combo again, and then gets back parts of that combo plus another Broom into his deck, and then it's time to repeat. On my turn, I felt like I had a big lore lead that I wanted to push it, so I decided to go for an Elsa Aladdin Rush double attack combo, which costs 22 ink. I go ahead and play Elsa, I play Aladdin, I ready my Elsa with the shield to weaken his Elsa so I could finish both his Mickey and Elsa with my Aladdin for a 4 lore gain. Now here, I'm not really sure what happened, but Pixelborn seems to have a bug in this moment, and my Aladdin gave me 4 lore instead of 2 per challenge. I have no idea what triggers this or caused this, but that's really unfortunate for my opponent as he dropped down to 0 lore and I went up to 18. I did go ahead and report this bug when it happened on Pixelborn, but this is the second time I've ever seen it happen, so I'm really not sure what that's about. So yeah, that bug pretty much ended up losing my opponent this game, which is unfortunate because I feel like we were having a pretty good mirror match. He tried to survive with a Maleficent on my Elsa and an Ursula, bringing my lore down to 17. But on my turn, I was able to combo Elsa with Aladdin again, with a Rafiki assist to double kill his Ursula and Maleficent. See, on this challenge, Aladdin did his normal 2 lore swing, so again, I don't really know what causes that bug where Aladdin challenges for 4 lore, so if any of you guys watching it know, let me know in the comments, and let's try to get the Pixelborn creator to fix this bug as soon as possible. For the last Aladdin combo, I also want to say that if you don't have an Aladdin in hand but have one in your banish pile, you could Broom one back into your deck, and draw it off of Cauldron and Magic Mirror, but this combo would cost 26 ink in total, which I think should be the absolute maximum ink you should work towards with this deck. For most games, I think 22 to 26 allows all the combos that you normally need. You might also notice that I kept the Befuddle instead of inking it, and that's because that card sometimes comes in handy as an extra Broom, since you can Befuddle your own Broom back into your hand to recycle another card, in addition to now leaving a Broom off the board for your opponent to have nothing to crash into. There's a ton of tricks late game with this deck, and even if I made a 2-hour long video covering late game Broom engines, I don't think that would be enough to explain all the crazy amount of situations that are available. But I hope this video at least gives some insight into the red-purple control matchup and why it ends up being one of the most complicated endgames in Lorcana. That's it for the video. Go ahead and leave a comment if you guys have any specific deck types or matchups you want me to cover. And if you enjoyed the video, don't forget to like and subscribe. And thanks for watching.